Hello YouTube. After level up your legs and level up your abs, today I'm going to help you level up your back. So I've said in the previous installments of this series that to me, the abs was the body part that most people had underdeveloped because of malpractices, that it was actually quite easy to get a six-pack. I said that the legs was the one with the most potential for size, but that most people never really wanted legs that were absolutely massive. So we never got to see tree trunks to the degree that they would look almost out of place on a natural lifter. And for the back, my assessment is similar in the sense that to me, the upper back is the most underdeveloped muscle groups, especially in, again, natural lifters. But in this case, it's a little bit different. The reason why it's so underdeveloped, it's also because it's the most underrated, meaning that I don't see many people showing appreciation towards the upper back. There are certain movements on YouTube Fitness that are giving it some love because they recognize that it is a body part that can be sculpted to perfection to attain an almost statuesque level of aesthetics, but unfortunately the abs or the pecs or the arms still retain a lot of the attention of many people that consume fitness content. So I think it's very important to have discussions, especially training discussions, around the upper back because, to me, because it is so underrated, we are leaving it in an underdeveloped state, and that cannot stay like this. I do think that many natural lifters, the type of physiques that I appraise, that I look at, tend to have an imbalance between the front and the back. While the front is way too developed compared to the back that is lacking in size, and that is because they focused on the front. It's not because naturals have a limit for the upper back or that you need to take drugs to be yoked or to have a thick upper back. All of that is nonsense. It's always, and it always boils down to training practices. So today, I'm going to help you revamp the way you see the upper back and also modify your training approach so that you can build a big, jacked and juicy traps, lats, rhomboids, etc., etc. Now, that neglect of the upper back, as I said, is something that we're going to have to correct. I have certain strategies that we're going to put in place because I know that a lot of you guys actually train upper back, but I'm certain that you don't train it the way it should be trained because you don't know how to. And it's not your fault. I trained for years and years without really understanding how I was supposed to train that body part or these body parts because the methods that that were being promoted to me were simply not appropriate. They were appropriate for other endeavors, but for bodybuilding, they were not. And I wish that someone could have actually told me that what I was doing was a waste of time and to correct my ways, but no one ever did. So I'm here to correct that mistake today, 5 years into the future. I won't be able to profit from it, but you will. All right, so the way I want you to think about upper back, which is going to help in you leveling it up afterwards, is that the upper back is not just one muscle, right? It's just like some people who say Africa is not a country. Yes, it's a bunch of small countries together that make up a continent. It's the same for the upper back. There are a lot of muscles that you have in this area that make up the upper back, but they are all separate and they can all be hit and targeted separately, meaning that there is no such thing as an exercise that hits the entire upper back equally. There are always an area of the upper back or another that is going to be favored. And if you want to develop all of the areas, you're going to have to understand that because if you don't do that, you're going to be one of these idiots that does deadlifts and thinks that it works the lats. Yes, it does work the lats a tiny bit, but you'll never have developed lats if the only thing you do is deadlifts. So that is part number one. You have to start to revamp the way you think about the upper back as an entity. It's a bunch of smaller entities put together. So a one compound hits all approach will fail. This approach tends to fail across the board. When people tell you, oh, you want bigger triceps, just do bench. Well, no, it doesn't work like that. It's not as simple. You cannot just look at the smaller muscles a smaller muscle, take a compound movement that involves the muscle, and think and believe that just becoming stronger at the compound will grow the muscle. Because most of the time, there is a bigger muscle group, the prime mover, that is responsible for the weight and for the power production. And guess what? If you get stronger on the movement, most of the time, that muscle is going to grow. So it's a mistake that needs to be avoided at all costs. It's the mistake that I did. I wanted a big upper back, and I was doing lifts that I thought were targeting the upper back, but my upper back was going absolutely nowhere. I spoke about that in the past. I had a flat upper back. It's tough to describe, but there was no definition, there were no ridges, there was no 3D pop that you expect again from an upper back. Look at a Greek statue. The upper back is just, it's like mountainous. There are creases and valleys. It's the way a man's back should look like. But for me and for many lifters, it wasn't the case. I was just flat. And the reason for that is because I wasn't actually hitting the upper back. I was hitting all the prime movers, and the upper back was assisting. Well, guess what? If it only assists, it's never going to grow. Just like if you only train your biceps with chin-ups to assist the movement, most people will not grow big biceps from that. There are exceptions, but the majority cannot treat their muscles like this. You need to train every single muscle as a priority if you want to prioritize its growth. So that's the approach that we are going to actually put forth and embrace to level up the upper back. But I also want to warn you against the exact opposite viewpoint. Extremes in this case are both bad. The extreme of trying to hit everything with one compound and seeing the back as one entity is bad, but trying to split it into microscopical, very small portions and trying to then hit every single fiber is also bad, because it then is going to lead to an over-obsession on specialization and on precision that is going to disallow you to just get the work done. And that is a problem as well. And I see that especially with people who think that by knowing the name of every single portion of the upper back, it gives them an edge in terms of training. That's not the case. Even if you have read 15 books and encyclopedia about the upper back and about muscular anatomy in particular, it doesn't make your training any better. And knowing the name of a muscle doesn't mean that you know how to hit it or that it's going to get hit in particular. I think that it's just a category of people that want to replace the practical application of lifting with the theory because it's less painful. Well, for these people, they'll never have yoked upper backs, so it's not a problem, they're not concerned. But for you, if you actually want to get jacked, forget about that. Also, forget about all of the hair splitting, about that muscle not technically being part of the upper back. We don't care about that. If it's behind you and you can see it and it's above your hips, it's upper back. If it's between the base of your neck and your hips, it's upper back. So you're going to see that I'm going to dump a bunch of muscles that you are not expecting in the mix. I just want to let you know that it truly doesn't fucking matter what the muscle is. It just is, again, being a poundexter to try and say that this muscle technically is part of this group. No one gives a fuck, okay? I see too many people speak about this, or they say, well, the real delt is technically part of the upper back, or it's part of the shoulder girdle, or the lats is not part of the back. It's not important. When you think about things like this, you have to go back to practicality. How am I going to use it in my training? Okay, so you tell me that the lats aren't part of the back. How do you train the lats? You do a pull. What do pulls work? The back. So it's part of the back. That's all you need to know, okay? I want to make that clear because I'm not going to waste time with semantical questions. The goal that we're going to espouse is to try to hit every single part of the back, but we're not going to fall into the pitfall of trying to isolate each fiber, because you will see that in general, but with the upper back in particular, isolation is a myth. Sometimes powerlifters use that, strength athletes in particular, or usually even people who pretend to be strength athletes, use that to, in a sense, attack isolation movements because they are not super fond of movements that are not focused on the big three or strength development. It's not what I'm saying here. Isolation is, of course, critical for bodybuilders. What I'm saying, however, is that it is true that you can't really isolate a muscle. Muscles work together in tandems. However, that doesn't mean that there aren't movements that are going to prioritize certain muscles and also deprioritize others. And this is when it becomes important for the upper back, because as you will see, there are movements that we're going to espouse and use to train a large portion of the upper back, and there are others that we're going to use to train other portions. It is good that we have the ability to hit a ton of muscles at once. It is also good that we have the ability to ignore some of them, because to program, that is what's needed. If you could do a lift that hit every single muscle at once, it would actually be a terrible lift. I think it's something people don't realize. If the deadlift was really the king of all lifts, as a lot of people like to say, because it hits so many muscles, even if we lived in a make-believe world where the chest, the biceps, the triceps, the neck will all hit equally by the deadlift, it would make it the worst lift on earth, because it would be absolutely impossible to program it. The beauty of compound movements and movements in general in terms of resistance training is that they all hit certain muscles and not others. It allows us to plan, it allows us to match recovery. Keep it in mind that concept was created for upper back because the upper back is the perfect representation of it. So, as I said, by upper back today, I mean lower back, the erectors, the lats, the rhomboids, the teres, minor and major, the traps, and the real delts. That's all you have to know. Yes, there are other muscles that are deeper, smaller muscles like the supra, whatever the fuck the name is, infinitus, I don't remember. I don't care. You don't need to know the name to hit it. And you're going to find that if you try and actively hit every single one of these muscles, the other muscles will be taken care of. Also, because I know that it's YouTube Fitness and most of the people who watch me are novices to intermediates, you don't have to worry about being like surgically precise when it comes to hitting the back. Just hit the back. Stop worrying so much, and you will find that you will develop a big and jacked upper back. And keep in mind also that all of these guys, as I said, work together. So most of the time when you hit your traps, you're not just hitting your traps. Other areas are going to get worked as well. But the worst thing you can do is to look at what I just said about that laundry list of muscle groups and think, okay, the upper back is a ton of muscles, all right? Meaning that if I were to program, it's going to take a ton of space, it's going to take a ton of effort, and on top of that, NH just told me that I cannot use one compound to hit them all, I'm going to need several compounds. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to find a way to hit them all at the same time, because that mindset is going to lead you to a back day. Now, leg days tend to be garbage, chest days are horrendous, tricep days are a joke, but back days have a particular place in my heart because I do believe that when you're being sent to hell, if you sinned in this life or the other, the seventh circle of hell is just a bunch of people programming back days. And your punishment is that you have to listen to them because it's going to melt your brain. The reason why is you cannot program a back day. Body part splits can be used, but never when they are done like this. The worst way to approach working the upper back is trying to work the upper back. Paradoxically, it's trying to only train the upper back and all of the upper back for one day. It is the surest way and the best recipe to keep a small back for the rest of your life. A bro split is already bad enough when you train something like the triceps once a week or the legs once a week, but when it's the back, it's a crime against humanity. So of course, never, ever, ever do it. And the reason why you don't want to do it is that it pretty much takes away all of the positive things about the upper back, all of the tools you could use to actually train it frequently, and it now makes it bad because if you train every single portion of the upper back at once, one, you're going to have to make sacrifices. There are portions that you won't be able to train as intensely because you're going to be pre-fatigued. Why? Because the upper back works as a unit. So by default, you have to make choices. And usually this means that 20% of the upper back will get relevant work and the rest is going to get the scraps. On top of that, if you're even a tiny bit advanced, the upper back, as I said, is a big muscle, but it's also a very endurance muscle. So what's going to happen to you is you're going to find out that your session is going to take forever because to reach baseline on every single part of the upper back, it's going to take too long. So on top of that, it's a waste of your time. it also is saddening because you cannot just train upper back. Meaning that most of the lifts that are going to be the most effective for the upper back are also going to recruit the legs. So if you do a pure back day, as I see many people do, chances are you're going to end up doing a bunch of isolation, a bunch of machines, a bunch of lat pull downs, of cable rows. And these are great movements by all means, but a day where you only do that is idiotic. So I want to make sure you never do that. Never do a day where the only thing you train is the back. Instead, what you want to do is you want to think about upper back in terms of frequency via separation. We want to hit the upper back as much as possible throughout the week, and we want to split it. Even though those muscles work together, you want to think of it as a puzzle, and you're going to take one piece of the puzzle like traps and put it on one day, lats and put it on the other day. Why? Because this allows you to actually utilize all of the benefits of that unit, of that muscle group we call the upper back. Now, don't make me say what I didn't say. I'm not telling you to work them via isolation, but separation. It's not the same. You might still use compounds that hit several muscle groups of the back on one day, but it's going to be separated from a different compound that hits a different amount of muscles, even muscles that are going to intertwine on a different day. Don't worry, I'm going to give you clear examples so as not to confuse you. But the reason why I promote that approach as opposed to a back day is because it is going to promote higher volume. Because believe it or not, when you take the volume for the upper back and you split it throughout the week, you do more volume than if you do it all in one day. This is of course obvious, but many people don't get it. And on top of that, it's high quality volume because every single time you can go high intensity, knowing you will have to recover for the next time because for the next day or the second next day, you will hit a different part of the upper back. So it's quality tonnage on top of that. It's also better recovery because it's a bitch to recover from a muscle group that you train once a week. Everyone who does leg days knows that. All of these memes about guys who say, oh, I can't walk for 3 days after leg day. Yeah, that's not a medal of glory. That's not something you should be proud of. You should be ashamed of it. It shows that you have terrible recovery. For me, I train legs every 2 days. I never get sore. I never get DOMS. Why? My legs are conditioned. The muscles are tailored towards growth. They don't have to complain or feel sore. They're always in a perpetual cycle of growth, which is in contradiction with what many people think, or they believe that if they're not sore, then they're not growing. That's not how muscles work. Soreness is just a sign of unpreparedness. It's not a sign of growth. It's just, again, your body telling you, hey, we haven't done whatever you just did in a while, so I'm feeling a little wonky right now. Meaning also that you most likely don't hit that muscle group enough. So for the upper back, we don't want to make that mistake either. We want to promote better recovery. As I said, the upper back is the most underrated muscle group. And usually when you underrate something, you don't judge it for its proper qualities. What is the best quality of the upper back? It's its ability to recover. Because, again, it's made up of small muscle groups. Small muscle groups have less work capacity in general, but they recover faster because there is less surface area covered by the muscle fibers. That is true across the board, but with the upper back, it's a double whammy, it's a double kiss-call effect because it's made up of small muscle groups that work together to make a bigger muscle group. So now it has excellent recovery ability, and on top of that, good work capacity if you know what you're doing, which all of these qualities are absolutely ignored if you do not hit the upper back frequently. So you want to train it as much as possible. It of course also boosts performance because every time you go in, you know that you have only a finite amount of sets for the upper back for that day, so you can go balls to the wall. And it also leads to sound programming. I've always believed that it's not that you program properly because it's not that you, okay, I will get this one right. It's not that you program properly because you understand the muscles, it's because you understand the muscles that you program properly. It's the same for the upper back. Once you get the nature of the beast, you will be able to produce proper programs. The people who produce back days tend to not understand the upper back, and that is their problem. And because we always want to have good programming practices for hypertrophy, we have to have a good understanding of the upper back. So that's what also I am preaching. Now, let's look at the technicality and the strategies to put in place when we look again at this unity, at this amalgamation of muscles. There is an ugly duckling within the upper back, and it's something that I mentioned already. Technically, people don't like to think about it as part of the upper back, but I included in the video for what I just said. It's the lower back. If you take the lower back out of the equation, you cannot program properly for upper back growth, because most movements that you're going to be using to train the upper back require lower back. So it's also what I said about sound programming. If you just want to do a split about upper back, but you refuse to admit or understand that the lower back plays a role, you are going to create an abomination where you're going to have the lifty do a ton of movements that are never going to involve the lower back, and therefore it's going to be a bad program. So we have to look at this ugly duckling. Why is it the ugly duckling of upper back training? Well, it's because it's the limiting factor, and no one likes limiting factors. Just like training arms where the grip could be an issue, it's never something that you want to discuss. And a lot of people end up thinking that if it's a limiting factor, we need to bypass it altogether. Although that is not technically incorrect, it doesn't mean that you can ignore it altogether. We still want to train the lower back. But the beauty of the lower back is that, unlike a lot of muscles, as I just said, this one can actually be trained indirectly. Now, what does that mean? I'm not saying by that you must just ignore it, as I said. Rather, it's one of the few muscles that can be an afterthought, because it's going to be recruited whether you like it or not. The lower back will be part of the equation. It doesn't mean that you can just ignore all of the lifts that involve the lower back. It's the opposite. You can just do them knowing that your bases are covered. So what I mean by that is any type of lift that involves what I call the bridge. When I think of the lower back, I think of it as a bridge between the legs and the upper body. I personally never think of the lower back as a mover, and I never want the lower back to be a mover. It should remain rigid and neutral if possible, but rigidity is the most important aspect, and it should serve as a very strong connector between the power production of the legs and the ability of the upper body to maintain stability. And that is true for squats, so for knee flexions in general, and that is true for pulls from the floor and horizontal pulls as well. That's what the lower back is going to do in that case. And that, to me, and this is one moment where you're catching me in peak minimalism, is enough. Meaning that if you are healthy and you don't have lower back problems, it is enough to just do that, to just utilize the lower back for its stabilization purposes, because it's going to grow it plentifully as is if you have proper technique. The reason why I preach that approach for lower back and not for abs is because, and it's just my opinion again, when you look at the musculature of the abs, I do think that bracing it is not enough to allow for proper growth, because there is potential for stretching in the abs that doesn't exist in the spine because of the way the spine is shaped and the way the human body can move. Meaning that if you look at the way the hip and the hip joint is going to flex, it is always going to be tailored towards allowing a stretching of the abdominal wall and rarely a stretching of the lower back area. And I'm sure you know what you mean. You know what I mean. Try to do crunches for your lower back. That wouldn't work, right? Why? Because you cannot bend like you would bend up in front of you like this for the lower back. It's just simply not possible. Your spine is not curved like that. It's not curved backwards like that, because it serves no evolutionary purposes to be able to do that, because your eyes are facing forward. I'm getting lost a bit, but that's the reason why I think that for the lower back, it's fine to train it like this. Now, I am personally not opposed to using other means, like hyperextensions or like bridges for the lower back. All of that is still valid, or reverse hypers if you want. But keep in mind one thing. All of these movements still prioritize other muscle groups in terms of development. When you do hyperextensions, you grow the glutes and the hamstrings in priority. The lower back is, again, a stabilizing force. So think about it in that aspect. Because if you are able to think about it like this, you will be able to also make sure that it doesn't become a limiting factor. Many people end up seeing the lower back as the reason why they cannot grow the upper back, but that is because they don't utilize it properly to start with. They have a tendency to over-recruit it or to just never recruit it at all, and therefore they cannot then act surprised when it's not doing what they want. So this also means that if we are going to look at training the upper back as a synergy, as synergistic muscle groups, the lower back will be tied most of the time with leg movement. And it's important to keep in mind because this means that there is a way to train upper back without recruiting lower back at all. I personally think that it's more efficient for total muscle mass to throw in legs at the same time you're training back, and it's something I'm going to go back to and explain to you my methods. But you could also just say that it's not something that you wish, or that for a specific day you don't want to train legs, and that is when the synergy dies, because it is absolutely possible to take the lower back out of the equation. Most upper back work that you can do that is going to be the most effective will actually require no legs at all. Just to reiterate so as not to confuse you, the reason why I told you that the lower back still needed to be part of the equation was because I believe that proper programming practices will link the legs with upper back work. Now, let's discuss the moments where you're going to do legless work, or the legs are not going to be, again, part of that equation. That is going to be when you're going to find methods to make sure that you don't have to use the lower back to stabilize, which most of the time means that you're not going to use the legs as power production. And there is a gazillion examples of that. You can do cable rows, you can do sill rows, you can do dumbbell rows, you can do any level of movements that are going to replicate a vertical pull where the legs are just dangling or they're on the floor and are not producing any energy. All of these need to be your bread and butter when we're talking about pure upper back development. Okay, the direct tonnage that is going to be directed towards the hypertrophy of the upper back needs to be done in that fashion. Why? Because by doing that, you're going to make sure that the lower back never becomes your limiting factor. I hope now that it's more clear. The reason why I said that is because if you only train upper back with legs and with lower back, you are in a sense signing up for the lower back being the limiting factor, because it's resilient, but it's not resilient enough to handle the amount of work that the upper back requires. Meaning that if you throw in, and it's an arbitrary number, 1,000 pounds of tonnage for upper back, and the lower back has to filter 1,000 pounds, guess what? Most likely it's going to give up first because it's not as resilient and endurant as the upper back. Meanwhile, if you throw in 300 pounds through the lower back and then 700 pounds without the lower back because you did movements that are legless, now it's a match made in heaven. You still get quality tonnage from leg-involved movements for the upper back, and then you fill up the rest with movements that leave the lower back alone. And just like that, it didn't become a limiting factor. If you are the type of person who does the opposite, you are going to underfeed your upper back. Because if the lower back can take 1,000 pounds and then it taps out, and the upper back can take 3,000 pounds and then it taps out, if you always use the lower back for the upper back, you tap out at 1,000, the upper back could have taken 2,000 more, so you're not going to grow as much as you could have. It's why I told you that a one compound hits or approach will fail. You have to have the ability to separate. Separation is key when it comes to having a jacked upper back. And that is the legless work I just described, something that I recommend you guys do, something that more and more people are doing and promoting, but something that 5 years ago was almost non-existent. Like an inverted row 5 years ago, people would look at you like as if you were a loon. A sill row, it was like a niche movement that no one did. Dumbbell rows was just, most people doing dumbbell rows were doing cheap dumbbell rows where the legs and the lower back were involved. Nowadays, we're moving towards a more bodybuilding-like approach to upper back, and it's going to lead, and you can actually cite me on that, to bigger upper backs down the line, because we're feeding more tonnage to an area that is glutinous and can take a ton of damage. And that is why, by doing this approach, we're going to have the ability to have a synergistic approach. If you follow what I just said, as I said, the lower back is mostly synergistic with the legs, and we can make it synergistic with the upper back if we so wish. But the upper back in itself is synergistic with absolutely nothing, because as I said, you can just train upper back. It's possible to just train the upper back by itself. And it's the reason why I'm not a fan of splits that try to pair other muscle groups with the upper back as if it made sense, because in my opinion it doesn't. Like for example, back and biceps. Can you explain to me why we would pair those two muscle groups together? What movement works both the biceps and the upper back? Well, you can tell me chin-ups, you're correct, or supinated grip rows, you're correct. But these movements are upper back movements that we modified via grip manipulation so that they also hit the biceps. So at the end of the day, it's just an upper body work. It's just an upper back work. It's not justifiable to make an entire split around the concept that you just made up. These are not synergistic muscles. So you could tell me, okay, well, which muscles are synergistic with upper back? And the answer is none. There are no muscles that are synergistic. You could argue forearms, because you're going to pull, so the forearms are going to be involved. But the forearms are like the lower back. If you train them by doing upper back, they're going to be trained by default. So you don't even have to think about it, so it's not technically synergistic. The upper back is its own thing, it's its own continent. And that could be a problem. You could tell me, okay, well, how do I program this stuff? Because I'm supposed to actually synergize with the rest of the program. Well, no. You see, this is why it's so great. Because the rest of the body functions in synergy, save for a few muscles like the calves that no one trains anyways, it is a great thing to have the ability to have this pocket of muscle groups that is not synergistic with anything but itself, because it can fill out the rest of the program. See, when you program with synergy in mind, you quickly run into the realization that sometimes there are pockets of the program that you cannot fill up because you have ran out of muscles that are synergistic with the muscles you selected for the split. Examples: you have a chest, shoulder, and tricep split. All right? You still have space for some movements. You would want more tonnage for certain movements. Which movements and which muscles are going to be synergistic with presses and movements that recruit the muscles I just cited? Almost none, right? You can't do quads, it's not synergistic. You can't do lower back, it's not. Glutes, it's not. Forearms, it's not. So you're out of option. How do you fill out the rest of the program? Well, you can either say fuck synergy and put any muscle there, which is valid, or you can just say, all right, I will keep the other muscles to put on a synergistic day with another muscle group later, and I'm going to actually complete that day with muscles of the upper back. The non-synergistic and the synergistic go hand in hand to make a complete program. So this is how we're going to think about this. Back muscles can serve as Lego blocks. We're going to take them, as I say, and plug them wherever in the program. And just as I told you already, it's beautiful because it's exactly the way we should train upper back. By doing that, we're making sure that we're splitting upper back volume throughout the week instead of putting it on certain days. So there will be no such thing as a back day, because every single day is upper back day. Keep that to yourself and actually apply that in your life, and you will see great results in terms of hypertrophy. Now, the way to think about this is to do it at the end. It's also something that is important that I just said. You never want to program a training regimen and a day of training, for example, around the muscles of the back. You don't want to open and think, okay, on this day, I want to train lats in particular. That doesn't work, because as I said, it's a Lego block. A Lego block is something you put at the end to complete the structure. You don't put it in the middle of nothing and then wait or build a pyramid around it. It doesn't work like that in this particular instance. So what you want to do is do your muscle split, your body part split, your gentleman split first, and then add the movements for the upper back that you want to actually implement. And in terms of categories and in terms of actual application of that, what I recommend you do is you have your compound movements with legs, you have your compound movements without legs, and you have your isolation. These three encompass all of the movements you can do for the upper back. If you follow what I preach, which is to train legs with upper back, sometimes you would have 1 to 2 movements that are leg plus compound. And for the example here, I'm using a 6-day split. Okay, so it's all out of 6. So 1 to 2 days where there's going to be a heavy compound movement that involves the legs out of 6 days. Then you're going to have your compound movements without the legs that are going to be 3 to 4 days out of 6 days. That is a lot of days, meaning that 3 to 4 out of 6 of your days will involve a compound movement for the upper back in particular that doesn't involve the legs. And then you have the isolation, which is a myth, quote unquote, but that are going to be movements that are not as, in a sense, heavy duty. They still target the upper back, and these ones you can do 4 to 6 times out of 6. That is how much work you can put the upper back through. So if I were to give you an example, 2 days a week, 2 days out of 6, so it's not technically 2 days a week, it's 2 days out of a week of 6 days, you are going to do something like a heavy pull, all right? 3 to 4 days out of the 6, you're going to do stuff like pull-ups, dumbbell rows, sill rows, ring rows, all of that stuff that doesn't involve the legs. And then for the 6 times, we're going to do isolation. So your smaller type of cable rows, your smaller type of one arm standing row can be used as well. You can also find something that is going to recruit the real delt. So some lateral raise can be implemented. Some shrugs can be implemented. Anything you can think of that doesn't require much effort, but still, one way or the other, targets the upper back. All of that is valid. And all of that will be programmed in that order, meaning that on your day, I want to see the compounds for the upper back with legs at the top, always, followed by the compound without the legs, followed by the isolation. It's always in that order and never differ from that. Why? We want to prioritize the most tonnage heavy movements that are going to be the most technically dangerous ones because they involve lower back, and put them at the top so that you're fresh and not fatigued when you do them. Then the compounds heavy for the upper back because you want to be still fresh to do them. And then the isolation. It's also a good tool because if you end up skipping the last few sets of the day, you're only skipping isolation, and we need to prioritize tonnage. It doesn't mean that the isolation is useless, it just means that it's less important than the rest. So this is the way you would need to think about programming for the upper back. Now keep in mind one thing, there is no back day in what I just described. All of what I just described are Lego blocks again. So one of these compounds can go on, the compound with legs can go on a lower day. This means that you can still train quads on that day. You can still do your knee flexions on that day. It's perfectly doable. Your compounds without the legs can go literally anywhere. If you have a push day or a day that is just upper body, there can still be movements like pull-ups or chin-ups. It's still doable, like rows. Rows go anywhere. You wouldn't believe how easy it is to program rows. And you need to be able to understand how easy it is, because I see many people who, when I look at their program, there's not enough upper back work, and it's because they think it's too complex to program or they don't find a spot. The reason why is because they think they need a spot. You don't need a spot. Upper back is like a car with an handicapped stick on it. You can park it anywhere. No one is going to bother you. And it's especially true with the isolation. Upper back isolation, you can do them at your desk at your job. That's how easy they are to fit in a program. So never be shy when it comes to actually doing it. Now, I don't want you as a novice or someone who has no actual training experience with upper back to do all of that at once. Start with 1 compound and legs a week, and then also add 1 to 2 compound without legs a week and 1 to 2 isolation, and go up from here. I have many people who ask me, hey, NH, how do I add movements to my program? That's how. You start small and you expand. That's how you actually use minimalism. Minimalism is step 1 of the trainee that then is going to lead to an expansion. You don't want to start with the expansion, you're going to burn out, and you don't want to stay minimalistic because you're going to go nowhere. Your upper back is, again, an auger. You need to feed it what it wants and what it needs, and never underestimate it. Let your upper back tell you when you're tired or fatigued. Don't start to impose limitations on it, because you will find that they're almost non-existent, and the most you progress, the more you're going to be surprised with how much you can train it. It is actually possible to do a 1 to 2 heavy compound movements with legs a week, plus 2 to 3 heavy horizontal pulls, and plus, so it's a total of 6 in total, vertical pulls a week. So most individuals are going to be able to do like 2 horizontal pulls and 2 to 3 vertical pulls a week. So in a 7-day span, in terms of heavy movements of 3 to 4 sets and isolation on top of that. It's absolutely possible, and it's something that I recommend. Of course, again, you have to build up to it, but for bodybuilding purposes, it's what I actually advocate. And if you look at my programs, it's going to be something you see. There is upper back everywhere. Now, tips I have for it to make sure that you can actually find space if you struggle to find space, not necessarily to actually find days to put it, but placing days where you want to put it is stuff like supersetting every single push with a pull. That is more doable than you would think. When you do a bench press, try doing a row afterwards. I guarantee you it's not going to damage your performance. Every single time there is a spot in the program for a superset, keep in mind that what will fit there with the most ease is either calves or abs, but these are cheating. Neck, this is cheating as well, because again, these are movements that just, in a sense, do their own thing by themselves. It's not really true for abs. And then you have muscles of the upper back. Muscles of the upper back are the perfect superset companions for your program. They go everywhere. So give it a try, right? It's like vanilla ice cream. Vanilla ice cream goes with pretty much any other type of ice creams. The upper back is the vanilla ice cream of the body. So treat it as such. You can also do something like hip hinges that you superset with a pull. It's going to be a bitch on the cardiovascular system, I'm not going to lie to you, but it's something you can try. Do your deadlifts and then do some pull-ups. It's not going to damage your performance. It might be tough on the grip, but again, keep an open mind for supersets. Something that I personally do as well is I like to do something like a pull, a heavy pull, and then if I have the ability to do it, I do shrugs. Sometimes I do calf raises with a barbell and then I shrug. Why? It don't cost nothing. It's just an easy movement that you can do at any point. And I guarantee you that it has an impact. You can grow a big yoke just by supersetting shrugs whenever you can. There is always place in a program for shrugs. There is also always place in a program for pullovers. Please do pullovers. The more I do them, the more I realize that I was an idiot to not start earlier, because what they have done to my lats is I have no words. It transformed my physique to an extent that is again incredible, and I want you to get the same benefit. But don't think that you need to find a specific place for pullovers. You can superset them with a ton of stuff. You can do them light, you can do them heavy. I always recommend never lower than 6 reps, and to keep 1 or 2 reps in reserves for the movement, just for the safety and integrity of the shoulder joint. But it's something you can do and you should be doing. Start with once a week and you will find that it's possible to do medium to heavy pullovers 2 to 3 times a week with no problems. That is tonnage for the upper back. There are always ways to find tonnage that you can actually attribute to the upper back. Always, you just have to look for it. Of course, you have to keep in mind recovery. So you have to listen to the body and look at the performance. You don't want to overtrain the upper back, even though that would be a tall order for most people. Most people would snap their shoulder, the tendon of their bicep, or they would have forearm tendonitis way before they got any damage done to the upper back. The upper back is extremely resilient, but still keep an eye on it. And especially true with tendons for pull-ups. Many people are going to try to do too many pull-ups and they can't, they get tendon pain. 1, you have to do pull-ups properly. I've already made a gazillion videos on that. And 2, you have to vary the grips. Don't do the same grip every time. Use fat grips, use towels, and do neutral, supinated, and pronated as much as you can. The camera just did something weird, so I'm going to check on it. All right. We are still on air. So it's what I recommend for you, because since I preach an approach to upper back training that is going to be an accumulation of volume that is going to be very frequent, I am afraid that some people are not going to get what I mean and they're going to get injured or hurt, or they're going to regress or stagnate. This is not my design or intention. If you follow what I said and you treat the upper back the way I expect you to, which is to split throughout the week with the frequency, you could run into problems if you don't keep in mind the recovery aspect. So look at the movement and don't be an idiot. If you're going to do an horizontal pull on Monday, keep in mind that doing another one on Tuesday is not a good choice. Prioritize an isolation on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday you can come back with a vertical pull, and then you can maybe do an horizontal pull again on Thursday. It's all up to you. Keep in mind also that the numbers I gave you were for a 6-day split. So if you only train 3 times a week, don't use the same numbers. You have to again scale it back down. It all depends on your program. So these were for the tips that I had to offer for you. And now I'm going to conclude with general wisdom for the upper back. Don't fall for the pull twice as much as you push meme. Why? Because for many people, it's either going to lead to too much volume or not enough volume. I personally pull much more than twice what I push. Why? Because pushing is not my priority, pulling is. So that type of absolutist statement ends up leading to just damage, because the chances of you falling into the exact category of people who need to pull twice as much as they push in terms of volume is almost nothing. It's the type of statement that thinks it does this and it offers that broad of a range of people who need to hear it, but in reality there's only like 2 guys that are here that it applies to, and the rest fall outside. The rest are like 1.8, 1.6, 2.2, 2.4. So don't think about it like this. Instead, think about what muscles need to be hit, how much they recover, and when can I hit them again to be safe and never get an injury. That is the way to go. You want to train the back whenever possible, and I truly mean that. Whenever there is a window of opportunity, train your back. You're never going to regret it. It's low impact for the most part if you don't train the legs at the same time, and it's an investment. If you want to have a big back, you have to give it volume. When I look at what it does and the difference it did when I actually approached the upper back in that fashion, compared to when I just would train it like a maniac for one day and they ignore it, it's night and day. The upper back truly responds the best to that type of approach. So do it as well, and you will see that you will develop a juicy upper back as well throughout the years. If you look at a man's body, right, there are certain muscle groups that with age are going to grow. Like a lot of people will say that the forearms are going to develop as you age, they get thicker. You'll see also that the legs of a lifter tend to develop, they fill up. All of that is very true. It absolutely is correct. All of the muscles are going to grow and mature as you train them. But I think that when it comes to one muscle group in particular, that is going to be the testimony of someone who spent their life lifting heavy shit, the upper back should be number one. It truly should be the mark of a seasoned lifter. And it would be a tragedy, in my opinion, to go your entire career by underfeeding the upper back and then defeating yourself as a result, because you're going to end up with underwhelming aesthetic visuals at the end of the day. So don't fall for that mistake. Apply the tips and practices I gave you in this episode, and with all of that, you should be on your way to level up your back. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.